MMORPG and its inherent battles, the same game was played by a weak kid for the support class. Useless, hopeless, can you use your abilities normally? He often had to listen to this, and the only thing he could do normally was to ask for forgiveness. It's a violent place kinematic hyper VR. MMORPG, called Ergosphere Online. Here you can become anyone if you try, and the motto of this game is, "Wake up your new personality." It is played by more than 20 million users and enjoy. But our main character is just a useless healer, and while he was thinking about it, he and his team were completely defeated. Soon, insults and blows were waiting for him, but all he can do is apologize. Here a friend stands up for him with the words, "Stop. We're inside the game, so it won't hurt." And despite such vile words, our Leorim apologizes again. And this is being successfully used. Now he needs 600 high-quality potions by tomorrow. The poor guy understands this is a huge amount of money, he will not be able to find them. But no one cares anymore. The guy is desperate. If he does not bring the potion he will be beaten again. He curses the game and leaves the world where his role is a healer. However, that same loser is not so simple. His true role is the avenger. In a deep cave, he appears out of nowhere and helps the newcomers defeat a huge monster. With an unflappable look, he cuts off the monster's arm, and a few moments later, the horns. Now, instead of the usual insults, compliments are showered in his direction. He is considered an outstanding player. But their conversations are interrupted and our hero is trampled into the ground, but he still has nothing. He's going to end it all with one punch, and he succeeds. A myriad of riches fall from the monster, and he is offered to take everything. But he takes only one thing. With this he will be able to purchase 600 potions. Soon he decides to quit the game. The time is already late. But a notification pops up with the question, does he really want to leave the world of this character? He is surprised this has never happened before. Probably some mistake, he thought, and decided to get out of the game as soon as possible. It's time for our hero to take off his helmet. Playing for such a strong class is very exhausting, so he should take a shower. But suddenly the helmet activates, and something strange starts happening. The poor guy complains about his eyesight. He looks at his hand and starts yelling his body is falling apart. Your video games are to blame for everything. But our hero is alive and he looks completely different. From a weak loser he turns into a real jock. Soon it dawns on him, he has turned into his character. He's getting sick and he's still worried about what's going on. The helmet claims that the loading of the character was successful and it's time to start his real training. Leorim does not understand what nonsense the helmet says, when suddenly he finds himself on the roof. Without having time to figure out how he could move from his room to the roof, a black monster overtakes him. Why the hell is this the real world? What's going on here? Increasingly, such thoughts overtake him, but the monster is not interested in this, and he attacks the careless avenger. Having flown 5 floors down, Leorim remains alive, not believing that this is reality, convinces himself that this is a dream. But it is clear from the reaction of passers-by that he is deeply mistaken. This is exactly his reality. Blow, barely having time to dodge, the coward understands that he needs to run from this monster. But why don't passers-by run? Because everything is being destroyed. It turns out they don't see the monster, whether or not he politely asks civilians to run away from here. But they don't see him either, but they feel. The main character falls into a stupor, he is not noticed. But the battle is still going on. The red-hot earth and several victims, that's what Leorim sees. Soon he hears screams. It turns out someone died. He understands that something needs to be done, and the only thing that comes to mind is flight. Fear and a desire to survive take hold of him. But they catch up with him and begin to beat him half to death. His life flashes before his eyes, his life as a loser. But why is he beaten every time? Then he deserved it. It was with these thoughts that he subconsciously put his hand forward and used his skill. Now he realized it all relates to the game. With the realization of this, he pulled out his sword and is firmly ready to turn the situation around. Using the critical skill, Ghost Sword of Revenge, the monster was cut in two. After that, a cutie system appeared behind Leorim's back, offering him rewards for completing the quest. Now it remains to choose only the reward for the quest. In the list there was money besides the big 3 million 1 point or 3 random boxes. He thought about it, but in the end decided to choose the first one that came along. Immediately after that the movement began, whether or not he was at home again, but it doesn't end there. The next day, they hung up on the news about yesterday's events near the Shindoban station. It turns out that there were repeated explosions, and there are also victims, after a thorough investigation it was decided that terrorists were to blame for everything. At this time, Lee Orem thoughtfully cooks and makes sure again that yesterday was real. The main character's sister comes and asks how he is, and falls into a stupor. Lee Orem greets her as if nothing had happened and invites her to the table. Only 2 words are heard from the sister: "Who are you?" It was quite an expected question, because how to explain the fact that you have changed so much in one day? But he figured out in advance how to solve this issue, saying, "Am I your brother? Do you not recognize me?" After that, she calmed down and took out a shocker. But he was no longer the same as before and easily dodged the first attack. After that he continued to prove that he was her brother, but it was useless because her youngest was like a poor kitten in the rain. Lee Orem continued to insist that he woke up like this. But no one would have believed in such a thing. Then he had to say only what no one knows except her. Mentioning his parents, and the fact that they both died in a car accident, and also that he was very sorry that he was rude to her that day. Now she could still see in this grown-up strong man, her younger brother. She lived a shocker and rushed to her brother. From where he could have wounds, he waved off and decided not to tell the events of yesterday, otherwise she would have been worried. But she is worried without that, and insists on visiting a doctor. Whether Orem is against it, he decides to go to school, then the sister will go with him to explain what happened as a nurse, she should be believed. But whether Orem is against it again, but he has no chance against a formidable sister with a shocker. The blogger tells about the mystical explosions that happened on the street. A red-haired stranger looks at him and wants to go check what happened there, but she is distracted by a classmate and eventually she meets Lee Orem and he seems familiar to her. Before going into the teacher's room, Lee Orem decides to go to the restroom. The fact is that even though his sister is a medical employee, the probability that she will be believed is very small, so he decides to use his reward for the quest's random boxing. He got a crystal with which he can use a skill of another class once, namely, he needs a mind control skill. This skill does not work on monsters, but how will it work on a real person? It was because of this that Lee Orem decided to first try to convince and use his trump card in an emergency. This moment came quickly. His eye fell on the deputy director because he would be able to convince the others that the skill had been used. The case is gaining momentum. The deputy director is clearly overreacting and leads quite absurd evidence. Having convinced the teacher, he quickly directs me to the classroom in order to explain what happened to the students. Office 1-3, the deputy director pushes a speech about a rare unknown disease of poor Lee Orem and even sheds a stingy tear. Everyone is in shock. The deputy director is crying. Soon he is taken away and our avenger takes his place at the desk. Soon classmates begin to wonder if this is the same loser. He invents a disease, but few people believe him and he begins to worry. But he is saved by that red-haired girl from the corridor. It turns out she is studying with him. She claims that she has heard about this disease before and will gain the trust of classmates. This time, Lee Orem got carried away, but he is interested in how Eun-hyun and his friends feel about such a change. They asked him for headphones, after which he quickly plunges into thoughts. He harbors the hope that after such a change he will no longer be bullied. He is sure in this body he is not the same weakling as he was before. But this confidence quickly disappears. In front of these three, he cannot even move, suffering still lives in him. After a little mockery, they decide to check whether Ori will be able to resist their techniques in his new body. He is taken for suffocation, but even with his new body, the loser remains a loser. Events a little earlier. In the evening, Lee Orem collects a briefcase and is about to go home. He is distracted by classmates and offered to walk together without seeing the reasons for refusal. He quickly agrees, but he receives a message from his friends and instead of walking with the girls, he has to run to the toilet. We are transported to the present where Orem continues to be strangled, but they do it for so long that it looks more like a hug. But the big guy is not going to retreat. He wants to break him morally and show the loser they know. He is already close to this. He realizes that although he is strong in body, in soul he is still the same. Obviously nothing will change. But then the dark side in his subconscious wakes up, which provokes him to act, because nothing will change if he does not try to change it. Because he is no longer so weak, he can. With these thoughts, he threw his opponent over himself and forcefully threw him to the floor. No one expected this, even Lee Orem himself. He could not stop shaking all over his body with adrenaline. But with this technique he only angered his enemies more, so he decided to tactically escape. At this time, the redhead was standing with her friend at the bus stop and thoughtfully looked at the headphones she borrowed from a classmate who was just running past. He ran without turning around, fear followed him on his heels. Eventually the teenager stumbled and fell. The youngster was timid with fear. They still caught up with him and continued what they started in the toilet. No one was going to let the loser go so early. Hundreds of blows rained down on him. The other two stood and watched this spectacle. At the same time, Leorim was immersed in his thoughts and almost completely gave up, when suddenly a red-haired woman appeared. She broke the bottle, thereby attracting all attention to herself, and stated that she intended to spend time with that boy and politely asked him to let go. It turns out she is the daughter of the head of a pharmaceutical company. However, this does not stop the bully. After her provocation, he is going to hit her, but his first support class wakes up again and Leorim and motivates him to act. Now he knows what to do because his class is no longer a healer. The guy makes a strong blow to the jaw, after which the bandit flies away. The youngster asks to stop this violence. Rebuffed the second time. This was clearly not expected. The loser became different because of illness? The thug got up again and was ready for the third round, and in a fit of rage swings in the hope of striking, but was unexpectedly blocked. Nevertheless, he managed to inflict a little damage, and immediately after that the Avenger's ability, damage absorption, was activated. All the damage inflicted on Leorim was returned, after which another one was used, the skill, Vindictive Flower. He strikes several blows in exchange for health. After a series of attacks, a blow to the chin was decisive. The bully fell unconscious, and the observers opened their mouths in amazement. In a fit of anger, the Avenger lifted the unconscious guy by the collar and was ready to strike another blow, but the red-haired woman brought him to his senses. Leorim stopped. His hand was covered in blood. He was about to leave with the girl, but another robber could not let this happen. Taking the nearest stick, the bully headed towards the main character. Suddenly, the red-haired woman's eyes lit up, and for mystical reasons, the bandit fell. It confused Leorim a little, and after that they left, but the guys remembered it, and they won't just leave him. Small scratches were treated by the girl, but still outwardly he looked bad. To prove it, she had to take a picture of him. The heroine's name is Kim Shermol. She considered this help as payment for the headphones lent to her. After she returned them and began to say goodbye since it was too late, she also wanted to talk to him about something then. But the conversation is not fast, so they will talk the next day at lunch. After that they said goodbye. On the way home, the young man wondered what they could talk to her about tomorrow. Suddenly, a new quest for submission appears in front of his face. Remembering the last fight with the monster, he decides without hesitation to refuse. It does not work to reject the task because of the penalty points scored. It turns out that when using abilities in the direction of an ordinary person, 100 penalty points are awarded. As a result, he has 400 penalty points, and he will be forcibly moved to the task. The player finds himself in the water now. He is all wet. Not a fair game, he thought before the yellow, mysterious door appeared.